The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows over the quiet suburban neighborhood. For decades, the homes on Maplewood Lane had been a picture of serenity, pristine lawns, flower beds bursting with color, and neighbors exchanging polite greetings. But beneath the calm surface, tension brewed. Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, had made it her mission to control every blade of grass, every window shutter, every mailbox. And now she had her sights set on Mrs. Eleanor Jennings, an 82-year-old widow who had called the neighborhood home for more than 40 years. Eleanor has always been meticulous about her property. Her roses bloomed in neat rows, her small vegetable garden thrived, and her porch, painted a cheerful shade of yellow, welcomed visitors like a warm embrace. Yet one gray Tuesday morning, a letter from the HOA arrived, stamped with the association's seal and sealed with a crisp, official air that belied the storm it heralded. Eleanor's hands trembled as she read the words aloud. It says here, "Violation of neighborhood landscape aesthetics policy. Immediate compliance required or legal action will be taken." Her heart pounded and her chest felt tight. For Eleanor, her home wasn't just walls and windows. It was decades of memories, laughter, and family milestones. The thought of being forced out by bureaucratic overreach and Karen's obsession with perfection was unbearable. Her mind raced through every rule, every guideline, every committee meeting she had attended over the years. None of it made sense. She had always done everything by the book. How could they accuse her of something so petty? At that very moment, Eleanor's son, Daniel, received a frantic phone call. "Mom, they're trying to force me out," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel's stomach sank. He had heard stories about Karen, how she had fined neighbors over perfectly healthy shrubs, threatened families over mailbox colors, and even tried to block home improvements that didn't suit her taste. But he never imagined she would go after his mother. By mid-afternoon, Daniel was driving down Maplewood Lane, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. He had prepared himself for confrontation, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for what awaited him. As he approached the familiar house with the cheerful yellow porch, he saw her standing in the driveway, clipboard in hand. Her signature smirk plastered across her face. Karen's eyes were sharp, calculating, and cold, exactly as he had pictured. She was measuring something, muttering under her breath, completely unaware that Daniel was just minutes away. Karen glanced up and spotted Eleanor sitting on the porch. Her frailty contrasted starkly with the woman's sheer determination. "Know the rules," Karen called, her voice carrying across the lawn. "This needs to be corrected immediately. Otherwise—" Her tone implied threats, but Daniel knew better. Karen thrived on fear, on the illusion of power over her neighbors. Daniel didn't waste another second. He parked the car and stepped onto the lawn, his shoes crunching softly against the gravel. Karen's smirk faltered when she saw him. "I'll tell you." "Must be her son?" she asked, attempting to maintain control. "Yes," Daniel said, his voice steady. "And I'm here to make sure my mother is not bullied out of her home." Karen's eyes narrowed, sizing him up. Well, this is a community matter," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the neighborhood. "Rules are rules, you know." Daniel didn't flinch. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folder filled with documents, legal papers, property deeds, photographs of the perfectly maintained garden, letters of compliance from the previous HOA meetings. "These rules," he said, flipping through the papers with calm precision, "do not apply to my mother in any legal sense. Her property is fully compliant. Any further harassment will not just be against her, will be considered harassment. Against me as well." A few board members had gathered behind Karen, whispering among themselves. They exchanged nervous glances. Karen, sensing her authority wavering, attempted to regain composure. "We're just trying to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood," she said, voice slightly higher than before. Daniel shook his head. "Shh. The integrity of the neighborhood does not include bullying elderly residents. Mrs. Jennings has lived here for over 40 years. She has followed every rule, and she will continue to do so without intimidation from anyone." For a moment, silence fell. Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears, a mixture of relief and pride. She had always feared she would have to leave. But now, seeing her son stand so firmly, she felt a renewed sense of security. Karen's expression shifted from smirk to something uncomfortably close to fear. This isn't over, she muttered, retreating slightly, her clipboard shaking in her hands. Daniel didn't move. He knew better than to let her regain a foothold. Over the next few days, the HOA sent more letters, but Daniel was prepared. He had researched legal precedents, consulted with attorneys, and documented every interaction. Karen tried to escalate, threatening fines and filing baseless complaints. But every attempt was met with calm, documented rebuttals. Neighbors began to notice. Whispers spread through the community about the overzealous woman who tried to intimidate an elderly widow. Slowly, support for Eleanor grew. Some neighbors shared their own stories of harassment, quietly relieved to have someone finally standing up to Karen's tyranny. The HOA board, once blinded by Karen's influence, began to hesitate. Realizing that Daniel's preparedness and determination were unshakable, one Saturday morning, Daniel returned to his mother's house with a team of landscapers and volunteers from the neighborhood. They worked together to prune the roses, clean the gutters, and ensure every inch of the yard was flawless, because Karen demanded it, but because Eleanor deserved it. Karen showed up, hoping to witness some minor fault, some slip she could exploit. But everything was perfect, and the crowd of supportive neighbors made her retreat almost comically. By the end of the week, Karen had retreated to her office, muttering about entitled children and rebellious neighbors. The board meetings continued, but her power had been effectively neutralized. Eleanor's home was safe, and more importantly, she felt respected and secure. Daniel and Eleanor spent that evening on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset. "You were amazing today," Eleanor said softly, squeezing his hand. "I didn't think anyone would stand up for me like that." Daniel smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "You've earned every bit of this, Mom. No one can take your home away from you while I'm here." The next few months were quiet, with Karen keeping her distance. Daniel had ensured that the HOA understood the limits of their authority and the consequences of harassment. Eleanor's life returned to its gentle rhythm, gardening, reading, hosting afternoon teas, but the experience had left an indelible mark. She had learned that standing up, even in the face of intimidation, was a powerful act. And Daniel had learned the importance of being prepared, showing up when it mattered most. The neighborhood itself changed subtly. Residents became more vigilant, less willing to accept unjust authority, and more willing to support one another. Karen's reign of subtle terror was over, replaced by a sense of fairness, justice, and community. In the end, Eleanor never had to fear losing her home again. The roses continued to bloom. The porch remained bright and welcoming. And the sunsets on Maplewood Lane carried with them a quiet victory, one earned not through aggression, but through steadfast courage and unwavering love. And every time Karen passed by, she would see Eleanor sitting on her porch, smiling at the neighborhood she had nurtured for decades. She'd realized that some homes and some families could never be bullied into submission. Asterisk, this story is just the beginning. Is so much more ahead. Subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey.